Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio where I'm back with another build project for the On30 San Lorenzo mini layout. This is going to be a good one too. We're going to be making a low wooden railroad trestle to cross over Burro Creek, or as the locals in San Lorenzo call it, Arroyo de los Burros. If you've been following along with this entire project, you know that the San Lorenzo mini layout is a tribute to my late friend Verne Niner and his wonderful On30 Estrella Sonora Grande layout. And I'm using the structures and figures and details from his award-winning San Lorenzo diorama, which happened to be featured on the cover of the 2015 On30 annual. The site for our trestle is just to the left of the new San Lorenzo depot here at Arroyo de los Burros. And as you can see, up until now, the track has been supported by a couple of foam blocks, and that's just not going to do. Since this is a mini layout, this is a very tight 10-inch radius curve. The little Bachmann Porters and other small locomotives have no trouble negotiating that, but it is going to call for some creative engineering where bridge building is concerned. Fortunately, I do have a little bit of experience building bridges on very tight curves like this. Back when I did the gruesome gulch layout, I had a very similar situation with a 10-inch radius curve that called for a curved trestle bridge. And I'm going to be using a lot of the same techniques here that I did back then. The first idea I'm borrowing from the gruesome gulch build is the laser cut curved stringers. This makes things so much easier when building a tight radius curved trestle bridge like this. I laser cut this out of some 1/4 inch thick basswood with the grain going this way, so it simulates a bridge stringers that are about scale foot thick. Now I know in real life trestles aren't really curved. Curved trestles aren't really curved. It seems counterintuitive, but it's true. The rails are curved, but the bridge itself is made up of short, straight sections which are stitched together to create the curve. But sometimes we cheat here in the model railroading hobby, and that's certainly the case here with a curve this tight. We're going to use some curved stringers. It's really hard to curve a 12 by 12 like this in real life, but we can get away with it at this scale. The plan is to build the entire bridge deck here at the workbench, and then we'll take it back and install it underneath the rails on the layout and build a couple of trestle bends for down below. And to that end, I've also laser cut some bridge length ties out of some 1/16 of an inch thick basswood. The ties on micro engineering On30 Flex Track scale out to about 6 by 6s. So this is a good match for those. So these are 6 by 6 by 10 feet in O scale. You want longer ties that are spaced more closely together on a trestle bridge like this than what comes with the standard Flex Track. And as is my usual practice, I want to distress and stain all of these pieces before I assemble them. The reason you want to stain the pieces before assembly is so that glue blobs don't show through. If you glue things up first, and then especially if you use like a wood glue, any kind of PVA, and then stain it afterwards, the glue acts as a resist to the stain, and you're going to get an uneven job. You're going to get places where the stain doesn't quite cover because of the glue. Right now I'm just sanding some of the char away from these laser cut pieces. Then I want to distress the tops of each and every one of these ties with a razor saw, so it enhances the wood grain. Yeah, it can be a little tedious, but if you don't enjoy tedious, repetitive tasks like this, then maybe scratch building is not for you. This is my favorite stain for simulating old weather-beaten wood. It's some kiwi black shoe dye mixed with isopropyl alcohol. And I'll give you my recipe. Every so often I have to give the recipe out again. It's real easy. You buy one of these little bottles with the applicator top. You take all the shoe dye, you pull this out, you pull all of the shoe dye out, all of it, into another container until there's just the residue on the inside. Then you fill it up with your 70% isopropyl alcohol, Some people like 90%. Either way. And then put the lid on, shake it up, and you're done. You've got your wood stain. You hold on to that shoe dye in another container so you can replenish it. Put a couple of drops in there, add more alcohol, shake it up, adjust the tone, make it lighter, darker, whatever you want. That's all there is to it. If you have a whole bunch of small pieces to do, like all these ties, easiest way to do that is to pour some of this into a shallow container and then just toss them in, a few at a time, and swirl them around. And you fish them out one by one and put them on a little pad of paper towels to dry. When you're done, you can pour the leftover stain back into your bottle. So no fuss, no muss. I'm really making more ties than I need here, but it's always better to have too many than not enough. Sometimes they want to stick together. You're going to want to separate those. And they might look really dark when they first come out of the stain, but they lighten up considerably as they dry. When I built the Gruesome Gulch trestle, I actually used little strips of ties, little blocks, and they were all connected by a little webbing in between the ties. So I laser cut those, and that made it really easy just to glue them on there. This time I wanted to do, individual ties instead, because it's a little more realistic look, I think. But that presents the problem of, well, how do you know where to put them? How do you position them on here? And I considered printing out a template that I could, tape it down on and, look at it from above. But I found this negative piece left over from when I did the Gruesome Gulch trestle in my scrap box. My box is scrap wood by my laser cutter, and it has the precise alignment of those tie strips that I created. So now I can just lay this on here and use it as a guide to put the individual ties into place. At least I think it'll work. Let's give it a shot. So since this bridge is the same 10-inch radius as that Gruesome Gulch trestle, this should work to give me the proper alignment and position. See how they're closer together at this end and further apart on this end. You don't have any of these problems, by the way, if you're building a straight trestle. It's much, much simpler. Curved trestle is always a bit of a challenge. The trick is going to be to not glue my little impromptu jig to the bridge. Put some downward pressure on those and then lift this off, and I can move on to the next tie. I should note that I also filed this out a little bit to give myself a little bit more wiggle room. So, okay, on down the line we go. Show you right here, I've got some longer ties. These are 12-foot ties coming out, and that's where the little vestibule is going to be. And so you have some longer ties coming out there right where the vent is, and that's where that fire barrel usually sits, or sand bucket. What I discovered as I was doing this is I really only need like half a template. I can just put that right there, and that tells me how far out these ties need to go and how far apart they need to be spaced on this side, and then they'll automatically, scrunch in on the other side. So I can just drop these in here. Make sure they're lined up right. Pull this off. Use it for the next batch. And this vestibule we're going to have on the inside of the curve. One of the points of the vestibule is if you're out on the bridge, working on the bridge or something, and a train comes, it gives you a place to get away, to escape from the train. So it'd be a good idea to have one on each side. So the moral of this story is don't throw away those cut-off scraps. Never know when they might come in handy. Of course, doing it this way, things aren't going to be, perfect. Some ties will be slightly out of alignment, etc. But that's fine. In fact, that's you want that, because this thing would have been built by guys with hand tools, basically, in the late 19th or early 20th century. So yeah, it wasn't going to be perfect. Well, it did okay. Came out even at the end. Now I'm cutting some guard timbers. This is out of some 4x6 stock. And the guard timbers go along the outside edges of the trestle, about a foot in from the end of these ties. And on the inside of the curve, I'm making them about 8 feet long. On the outside, they'll be longer than that. They have to be pretty short on the inside because it's such a sharp curve. So I'll measure in a scale foot here, right there. It goes on there just like that. So I'm just putting them a scale foot in at the beginning and the end of the beam. Because of the curve, it's gonna be a little wonky there on the edge. But that's okay. That just adds to the character, right? On the outside of the curve, make each of these about 9.5 feet long. That'll work. One thing that really dresses up a structure like this is some nut bolt washer castings. And I've got some here from Grantline. I'm drilling some little holes. Basically, I want a nut bolt washer casting to go through into every other tie from these guard timbers. Got this supported underneath. I'm using a number 70 bit in my pin vise, my twist drill. Now I need some cyanoacrylate. Cut one of these off the sprue. Try not to lose it. Grab it with the tweezers. Dip it in the cyanoacrylate. And we push it down into the hole. Just got to do that about 100 more times. No problem. I want to add some decking to these vestibules. I've cut some of this coffee stir stick into scale 2-foot lengths. Now that is ready to install underneath the rails. So this needs to go underneath here. But first I need to remove the plastic ties. That's pretty easy to do. Just need to cut off the cast-in spikes on one side. Once I get these ties off, the rails should stay more or less engaged, but I'll be checking all the time and adjusting to make sure they do stay engaged. Let me just go around and pop that off on one side. where we just cut. Now I can cut through that webbing underneath the rail. Take off the last bit at each end. There we go. Let's see how this fits. Like a glove. Now I'm mixing up some 5-minute epoxy resin, which I'm going to apply to the bottom of the rails, just in a couple of spots, here and here, just to hold it in place, because the rest of the rail is going to be held down to the bridge deck with rail spikes. Just a little bit, the bottom of the rails here. I don't want to use a lot of this because, well, it dries shiny and, looks like epoxy. It kind of tends to stand out. A little bit at each end, too. And now we carefully move the bridge deck up into position. Like so. Make sure the rails are centered over the top of those beams, those curved beams. And then I've got my same foam blocks that I'd used to hold up the track before, trimmed them down just a wee bit. So now I can use them to push up on this, apply upward pressure. And yes, I'm going to check the gauge. Got my NMRA standards gauge here. Pretty good. That looks pretty good. I also have my little wood block that I use while spiking rail. That should fit snugly between the rails when they're engaged. Might be a little tight there. That looks good. I'll apply some weight to the top of the rails. Making sure, once again, I'm going to check this one more time. You can never check the gauge too often. And yes, I am aware that they make these handy little clamps. Micromark has them. Fast Tracks has them. They hold the track engaged while you're spiking and doing things like this. And I should probably pick up some of those. I don't have any, so I'm doing it this way. Now, while I wait for that epoxy to cure, we can move on to building the trestle beds. Once again, my scrap box comes to the rescue, and this is a good example of why I don't throw things away that I think I'll need at some point. This is a jig that I created for building trestle bents on the Big Thunder Creek trestle many moons ago. The dimensions are pretty close to what I need now for this trestle over Burro Creek. I need to build 2 trestle bents, excuse me, the same height. They're not quite as tall as this. The bents are only about 9 feet tall. To the top of the trestle deck, it's a little less than 10 feet from there down to the bottom of the creek. So I need to modify this a little bit, but then there's no reason why I can't use it for this project as well. Now I've shown how I make these before. It's pretty straightforward. I just draw the whole thing out on some graph paper like this. I don't always ink the lines or get as elaborate as I have with this one, but sometimes that's fun too. Draw the whole thing out, put some clear packaging tape over the top, and that way when you glue the pieces up, they won't stick to the paper. You can also add stops like I did here, so I can just slide the top sill in right there, and then glue the legs into place. I'm going to cut this whole thing off right here. I don't need this bottom sill on here because this is a different kind of trestle bent. This one is actually for a beam trestle, and we're going to be making a pile trestle here, so it doesn't need this footer on it. On a pile trestle, you have these round poles or piles, which are actually driven down into the creek bed, or the Arroyo in this case, with a pile driver. Works well in places where there's not a lot of water going through there, so I think that's a good choice for this location. Now, it looks like I designed this with a 10 by 10 in mind for the top sill. Now, as for the design of this trestle bent, there's a great book out there. Let me grab it off the shelf so I can show you. This book right here from Calmback Publishing, publishers of Model Railroader magazine, is an invaluable resource on just about every kind of railroad bridge ever built or designed. It's all in here with very detailed drawings and explanations on, see, I've got the timber trestle marked right there, on how they were built and why they were built the way they were, and how things like trestle bents go together, how to do it properly, even how to build a jig. This is a great book. I'm pretty sure this book is out of print now, but if you can find yourself a copy out there on the interwebs or elsewhere, I highly suggest you pick it up if you're going to be scratch building any kind of bridges at all. This is a great resource to have. I look at this book all the time. The trestle we're building today is a pretty basic one. It's sometimes called a low boy trestle, and it's not that long, so there's just going to be a couple of trestle bents, and I'm not going to need stringers tying the bents together like you would on a taller trestle. Now I'm going to need 4 upright piles. Looks like the piles here would be about 10 inches in diameter also. So I've got some rounds that are pretty darn close to that size. Actually about 7/32 of an inch in diameter. Just adding some distress, some more pronounced wood grain at the edge of a razor saw. For the straight ones, I need 4 that are each 2 3/16 long. And cutting the straight ones is fairly easy. I'm rotating it so I don't split out one side. There we go. Now to cut these angled piles and get them all consistent, the same length, same angle, I'm going to use a cutting jig. So I'm taking a little piece of cardboard, line it up there, with the top and the bottom, the inside of that beam. And then I can draw a line like so. There's my angle. Get some 1/4 inch, and we'll put that on each side of that. Squeeze that in between those. Then when that glue has set up, flip that over, trim these off flush. And now I've got a cutting jig where I can just lay my round in there and get the correct length and angle every time. The important thing to remember is once you have it in the jig and you've done that first cut, not to twist or move it around. You want it to stay in there steady, so you'll get a matching cut on the other end when you flip it around. In fact, I put a little piece of tape on there just to make sure that's not going to move. All right, 1 down, 3 to go. And on the subsequent cuts, you can just take the cutoff piece and line that angle up at the top. So then you only have 1 cut to make. Jigs make everything easier. And then I just need 4 6x8 cross braces. 2, 3, and number 4. Got all my lumber. Now I just need to get some stain on all this. Again, using the same stain that I used for the deck pieces. And we'll let all that dry. And now with the stain dry, I've got the top sill pinned into place on the jig, and I can go ahead with the rest of the assembly. Get a little yellow carpenter's glue on here and we can go to town. Start with the straight piles. I can push those into place straight up from the bottom. Get a couple of pins to position them. And then for the angled ones, you got to kind of rotate them until that angle meets up properly with the top sill. Keep an upward pressure in the bottom there. All right, moving right along. Now I'm about ready for the cross pieces, but I want these to be up a little bit higher, not in the same position as what's on the drawing here, because the ground level on this bent is right here. So we want that, to be a couple of feet above the ground. I believe we can take the pins out and flip this over. I want to support that underneath, and we can put that second cross piece on. Okay, now we build the second one. I'm only building 2 of these, but you can see how, with a jig set up like this, you can actually whip through these pretty fast. Each one of these is not taking me more than 10 minutes. Wanted to have some big old chonky bolts on here, so I've got some Grant Line number 16s. These are pretty good size. Dab of DA down in the hole. These are so big I don't even need tweezers. Now before I install these underneath the bridge, I do a little pre-weathering with my hand pastels. Going to add some more rust to these bolt heads. Already painted them a dark brown, but there's a little more. I want to have some streaks coming down. I did a test fit on these over on the layout and found they were just a tiny bit short. So I added this cardboard shim to the bottom of each one of the bents. It also helps them stand upright. And this will all be covered up with dirt and rocks and stuff when the scene is finished. I'm going to pull out these foam blocks. This cardboard makes them easier to glue into place too. Where I want to position these is right here where those vestibules are. Make sure that's positioned correctly. Should be parallel to the ties, and the top sill shouldn't come out any further than the ties. Okay, I think that's about got it. Yeah, I'll put just a little weight on there until the glue dries. Now with the bridge properly supported, I can start spiking the rail down into place, permanently. I'm using some micro engineering medium rail spikes and my Xuron spiking tool. And since both the ties and the stringer underneath are basswood, I can just push them right down in there. It's pretty soft wood. I'm using my little block here to keep things engaged. And the way I like to spike on a bridge like this is alternating inside and outside of the rail. So there'll be a spike here, 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 so and so on. So every single tie gets 2 spikes, but they alternate inside or outside rail. I find it helps to go in at a bit of an angle, push it down flush like that. And then when I finish the section, I just take my block and move it down to the next part. These spiking pliers have a little groove right there. Well, 2 little grooves. It's like a T-shaped groove. And that holds the head of the spike firmly in place, more or less. You got to test it to make sure it's in there right. But if you get it right, they are very helpful. Every once in a while, you get a spike that's kind of deformed and, don't hold on to it. Get rid of that one. You don't need it. Not going to lie, this definitely takes a minute. But I think it's worth it. Look at that. I hardly believe it. Broke my dang pliers. I didn't even know you could break these. Well, I had to finish up with old-fashioned needle nose, but I think we got it. Let's try the dynamite car test. Well, nothing exploded, so I guess we did all right. All right, now I can finish up and detail the rest of the scene. One of the first things I like to do is take my dark stain and go back over the center of the bridge between the rails, where all the grime and grease and oil would drip. And darken that up a little bit, put some spots of black on here. Then I'll take my pan pastels and go over the heads of those rail spikes, the sides of the rails. Kind of get rid of anything that's excessively shiny. Rust it up. Now I've got a couple of fire barrels. And I wanted these to look like, they've been out in the weather for a long time. And I accomplished that look. You can see here how they kind of fade down towards the bottom just by painting them like regular barrels first and then dry brushing red over the top. Now I'll hit all of that with some clear matte finish. Now, while you guys weren't looking, I went back and added some retaining wall abutments under each side of the bridge. And these are just built out of junk, out of my scrap box. I wanted each one to have its own personality. So the one on this end down here is pretty standard looking. But over here, I wanted it to look like it had to be shored up over and over again, like they're fighting a losing battle against erosion there. I also found this ladder in my scrap box. So we're going to put that right here. These are easy enough to build, just out of some scale 2x4s. Now, it's time to start detailing the creek bed itself with real rocks and dirt and, desert foliage, things like that. But this video is already running kind of long, so I think what we're going to do is skip ahead, and we'll show all of that in the next video, which is going to be the final one in this San Lorenzo series, at least for now, where we do all the ground cover and the desert plants and all the final details. And just one last thing quickly before we go, even though Burro Creek here is meant to be a dry wash, there's going to be some water down underground or hidden pools back up here in the Arroyo. So you would have some deciduous trees like these cottonwoods back in here. And I'll be talking a lot more about those in the next episode. Okay, got a thorough cleaning on the track, including all that paint and pastels and gunk over on the bridge. Let's see how she looks. Hey, thanks for joining me today for the build of Burro Creek Trestle. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you're subscribed with those notifications turned on so you won't miss the next one. Until then, you can also follow for free over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thundermesa, or on Instagram at thunder.mesa, and check out the resources available on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, a huge thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.